Hi, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. But first, thank you. We are at 648 subscribers here on YouTube. Hope you enjoy the great content. There are no examples here and no image up there for today, as this is a very serious critical thought. We're talking about the bar of game quality and how it's gone up and what it means for independent developers. As you know, I've reviewed and spotlit, I think that's the correct term there, a lot of independent games here on the channel and on GameWisdom.com. And they range in quality. We've seen some amazing indie games, we've seen some not so amazing ones. And I've gotten some video requests or some review requests of games that I've ran into problems with. And I'm not just talking about it being a personal issue, I'm talking about gameplay and even technical issues. And these are for games that are either due out or already out. And a part of me wants to hold back, not be as forceful, not point these issues out as much, because I know how much trouble it is and how much challenge it is to be an independent developer in this market. But at the same time, as someone who critically examines these games as a profession and as pretty much my motto for this channel and site, I can't bite my tongue on these issues. And it really goes back to just how much the bar of quality when it comes to making a game has really elevated over the last, I would say, 8 years at this point. We've seen independent games all over the spectrum, from amazing titles like Braid, Fez, Binding of Isaac. I can go on for 10 minutes. And then there are not so good games. And I'm not going to name any here, but I'm sure you know of at least one or two yourself. Games where there are numerous gameplay issues, technical problems. It looks like something that was just like put together over a weekend. And we've talked about how less than scrupulous, I just mispronounced that too, game developers release very much shovelware titles. And this is very bad, especially for developers who are trying to make ends meet and just trying to get a game out there. As I've said, it's becoming a lot harder and harder for an independent game to stand out, especially if you don't have the marketing or the bucks that other independent studios have. When we look at developers like Clay Entertainment, they have really risen up and become one of my favorite independent studios. They've done amazing aesthetic design, unique gameplay, and they're just a great bunch of guys. I've loved almost every one of their games. But for every studio like that, there are smaller teams, maybe even like 3-4 man teams, who are trying to make a game, just trying to get something out there to sell, and it just doesn't work. It could be a gameplay issue, could be technical, or it could be the game just doesn't look good. And that's also very troubling. As we all know, creating a very unique aesthetic and graphics engine takes a lot of time and money, and sometimes you just don't have that ability, whether it's a technical issue or artistic, or you simply can't pay someone. But as we all know, first impressions are very key, especially for video games. If your game doesn't look good from like minute one, it's going to be very hard to keep people invested to find that amazing gameplay maybe 40 minutes to an hour in. But it's becoming even more and more harder to give these games a fair shot. I mean, I'll give you an example. Right now, I've got 5 different indie games I've received press copies for, and a few more along the way, all that I'm going to have to look at and examine. And for someone who's not doing this for a professional setting, they're going to take one look at a game. If it looks bad or it doesn't look all that impressive, they're going to stop within 10 to 15 seconds. But when it comes to the independent market, I'm just finding it that developers are really struggling unless they aim high. And it's putting a lot more pressure on them to make that #1 killer, one-of-a-kind idea from the word go. When I spoke with Abby Games a few weeks ago regarding Renowned Explorers, they talked about how much of a hellish cycle it was to develop the game, because they were basically building the engine and building completely new designs all at the same time. In the past, with a publisher guiding you, the first game again was going to be the foundation, and then you're given the freedom to experiment and evolve with games 2 and maybe 3. But in today's setting, especially with how much growth and uniqueness there is with independent games, consumers expect more. They expect your first game to be unique, original, polished, and great. If it's not any of those things, they're not going to give you a second or much less a third chance to make that dream game. And because of that, it's putting more and more of a strain on the developer. As I said, normally a development cycle could be between 6 to 12 months for the first game and then another 6 to 12 months for the second one. And those are just hypotheticals. With more complex games, or depending upon the team, it could take even more time. Stardew Valley took about 4 years to come out from one person. And that game, even how great it was, still also had some light issues, some control problems, stuff like that. But the amazing parts of the game stood out enough to downplay those negative elements. But when you have an independent game that comes out with negative elements right from the beginning that only become more and more troublesome as time goes on, it becomes much more harder to keep invested in that game. And it becomes very hard for me as well. Like I said, I don't like to bag on games because I know how hard it is for an independent developer sometimes to put them out. But at the same time, if the dog won't hunt, there's not much I can do about it. And I've played independent games like that where just from like the first minute of gameplay, I can already see problems. And I can either ignore them or just don't review the game at all. But then that also causes issues because then the game is basically getting a free pass. And again, this is a very tricky issue, especially for someone like me who's sort of becoming this middle ground between developers and the consumer. But I can't hold back my tongue, or I can't bite my tongue when there's issues like this. So, to give you the heads up, there's going to be a game as of when I'm recording this. I'll probably spotlight it tomorrow. That I think it's going to be my first real negative spotlight of a game on the channel here. And I try to do my best to downplay and ignore it, but when the issues are just staring you in the face, I just cannot ignore it, and that's the problem. And I know when I put this out and people are going to see it, it's going to affect the sales of the game, and may affect them being able to work on this and maybe even improve it in time to come. But again, when you're trying to look at something critically, you can't hold back because of, you're hoping that will get better. If you remember my review of Zombicide, I kind of blasted that game as well. And I ended it saying that there is a chance that these issues will be improved, that they will be fixed as per Soldak's MO. But at the same time, I can't critique a game on what might happen. I have to look at what is the state of the game now. This is also why I tend to be very lax and more lenient on early access games, because I know that it's still a work in progress. But the second you tell me that your game is considered 1.0 and it's done, the gloves have to come off. I can't hold back anymore and say, oh, well, this could get fixed. But when you're selling this as your finished product or your retail product, I cannot just let these issues go. And what worries me and concerns me about today's market is that, again, the days where you could put together something and, the idea of doing your best being enough and still selling a game reasonably well have passed us. We are seeing so many amazing games coming out that you really need a strong first impression. Even if your game's on early access and it's considered, 0.0001 alpha, people still expect to have some kind of a measure or a standard. And that is a big issue and one that's too big to talk about in today's critical thought. But I'm going to ask you for right now, do you think there should be a standard for early access games? And if there is, what should it be? I really don't know. But getting back to just the market in general, Like I said, the bar has just been risen so much that a lot of developers who have been, barely being able to make do, I think have fallen out or are having trouble staying afloat. Again, if your game doesn't pop within 10 to 15 minutes of play, it doesn't matter if it's an amazing game 3 hours in, chances are most people aren't going to stick around. And again, this puts more work on the developer, more work on the publisher or the PR person to make sure that people are playing this game and understand what makes it so great. Going back to Renowned Explorers, for instance, when I spoke with Adrian from Abbey Games, he told me that they basically have to thank Total Biscuit for looking at Renowned Explorers, because if he didn't give that game a look and let people know what it's all about, it wasn't going to sell itself. And that, I think, is the problem in a nutshell. A lot of smaller independent games or more unique ones have a very hard time selling themselves. That's why you need YouTubers, you need journalists, you need reviews and proof out there to let people know that this is a game worth playing. But if your game doesn't make a good first impression, or it's very hard to get people to even look at your game, that's basically 2 shots in the foot before your game is even out. And with the rate that the Steam Store and iOS and other digital places move, if your game doesn't wow people within like a few hours of it being released, it could disappear forever. And that can be a killer for a studio, especially when you're just a bunch of people just trying to make a game and this is your first big game. So, like I said, this is a more of a serious issue, and I don't know how I want to approach things. But like I said, tune in tomorrow for, I guess you're going to see me being some of a downer if you want to see that. But that's today's Critical Thought. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for more great footage and our next thought then. This has been, once again, Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and I will see you all tomorrow. Take care. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. Check out game-wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under Game Wisdom if you would like to donate and help contribute to keeping Game Wisdom going. Your donations can not only give us the monthly funding we need to keep supporting ourselves, but if we can hit some goals, it will mean more great content for you, and there are some nifty little rewards there as well. Thanks again for watching this video, and be sure to tune into the next one real soon.